Okay everyone, so this is a hexagon quilt that we are beginning in this video. This is going to be a two-parter video. First, it's going to be how to piece this quilt without paper. And then the second will be how to do a paper pieced block as well. Now, the paper pieced and non-paper pieced are the same quilt. It's just done different ways. We also have the version that is going to be done with the sewing machine, where I will show you how to put it on a sewing machine. So without further ado, we're going to start off with the non-paper pieced. Okay, so first we're going to do the non-paper pieced. If you're wondering how I get my pieces to look so uniform, I usually use a jelly roll. This is a jelly roll that is 2.5 inches, and it comes in a lovely variety of your usual fabrics, or I will use a simple version of yardage. Now, first I will take and I will, using this hexagon piece that you see, I bought this, I believe, at Hobby Lobby, but you can also purchase it from any craft store, and I will lay it down accordingly to the way I'm wanting it to look. And that is that I will try not to cut against the grain. Sometimes it's a little harder, and I will trace it. So I'm going to do this lovely polka dot. Now, the polka dots are a fun one because of the fact that it doesn't matter which way you cut them, you get the same look. So I'm going to first lay the piece on top, line it up. I use strictly Bic pens only. Kudos to Bic. They are a wonderful pen to use for quilting and sewing and crafting of all sorts. Now, I will just simply go across either side. Luckily, with jelly rolls, you do not have to take additional measurements and make sure you cut all the way around. Now, second, I will lay that down and I will cut off at the point of my hexagon. Now you can see I have my hexagon already traced and ready to be cut. So I will take and carefully cut on the lines. Make sure that you do not wobble out of those lines or miscut, because whenever you're tracing and cutting like I do, it is very easy to cut outside the lines. Now, you can use a rotary cutter with that, but I have not tried it, as I do many different ones and I like to keep a variety of fabric. Alright, so now I have my piece cut out and it's ready to go into, let's get rid of these scraps. We are ready to go into the bags of pieces, like so. And as I try to tell everyone, this is a neat way to use up all your scraps. Like, boy, you get so many scraps whenever you're making other quilts. But some of these scraps could be a pretty good size. Or you're working on a project and you have a pretty good size piece left over, such as with my diagonal rainbow. That is another way to do a hexagon quilt or a tumbler quilt. You just cut out the pieces and make scraps less of a need to have to figure out what to do with later, because you have so many scraps it's just confetti and you can just toss it aside and throw it out. Now, I have began already stitching. Now, I like to pin them in a uniform line, being sure that this right here is not going to be a hassle to try to pin. So I always like to pin ahead of time. This is a good project to work on when you're watching TV or sitting in traffic, or if you're sitting outside of work. I will take this with me when I go to work, and when I'm just sitting waiting on a ride, or if I'm just simply not doing much of anything, I will even work on stitching these while I'm on break. Then that way I don't have to be fidgety or not doing anything with my hands for an extended period of time. So I will take and stitch by hand, because it's very hard, unfortunately, to try to piece these corners on a sewing machine. Now I will take and stitch, and being sure that I do not accidentally in any way forget where I started and where I ended on this. Now, if you are sewing these and you happen to have to get up for any reason, make sure you pin to stay so that you can always come back to your project whenever you are working on it. I typically will lay mine out like this to see how it looks, and as you can see, it looks very lovely. It is not rumpled or anything like that, and I will make sure to keep them pinned and properly positioned in place. The cutting and sorting of them I don't do, because they're all going to be the same size and shape. So I keep them in a bag, and I keep them in a tote bag or something of that sort. As you can see here, I will keep the bag of pieces as well as a on-the-go sewing kit. I like to keep my on-the-go sewing kit in a place where I can get to it. I always make sure to have my straight pins as well as my pin cushion, a lovely good pair of scissors, and my stitching thread is for hand sewing. Now next, you want to make sure that whenever you go to stitch them like I have here, where I have hand stitched them together, you want to make sure that you line them up the best you can. Now if they're not perfectly lined up, that's okay, because when you go to piece them like so, you want to make sure that the two pieces come together at one point. That point, which is a little harder to meet, as long as it is formed right here, you will not have to come back and redo it. The smaller pieces that you work with, which are behind me, comes out to be a little smaller than what a lot of people would think it would be, actually. But I trace those out, which is like this. And this is a 3/4. Once I removed the 1/4 inch seam, I have a half. The 1/2 inch is where I got these sides that are behind me for my wall. Now you can by all means make these any size you wish, but I prefer to try to keep them uniform in fashion. So I will trace them out on the clear it's almost like plastic, which is right here, but it's really good for purchasing at the craft store to cut out your pieces accordingly to size. Because of the fact that I make so many pieces that I have to constantly keep them together, I keep mine in a school box. These I keep in a straight pin. It's a straight pin box of sorts, like so. And I will keep them all nice and tidy in there and keep them in the same school box. Now, non-piecing, you want to have a bigger piece, because the smaller the pieces, the harder, pointing to this one behind me, the harder it is to put it together, because of the fact that those pieces are so little, which is right here. It is going to take more to put them together. It will take me most likely a additional 30 to 45 minutes to an hour to make sure that that whole piece behind me, which took me about a day to put together, is all perfectly lined up. Now, I keep that one in a box separate from the rest of them because they are smaller, but I will cut them out whenever I have just enough of a piece to cut. Alright, so I have found my 10. These are your small pieces that I was showing that I cut out. The ones with the umbrella, I believe I got those on Wish. But a lot of these pieces are from various projects that I've worked on. And all I'm simply doing is stitching them together in the same fashion to make a smaller quilt. Most likely the quilt will be used for a Barbie quilt or a doll quilt. But it can be used for any form of quilting. So I know a lot of folks are probably going, why is she doing them so small? I actually don't know. When I'm working on a project, I like to find out how small I can get them without necessarily having to redo it. Alrighty, so I have been working on finishing up this, which I still have a good length to go. But from the looks of this, I have a good start. Now, I would like to say this is a good travel project, because if you're traveling long distance and, you know, you get really bored. When I'm in a car, I get really bored because I'm just sitting there. So I will start kind of playing with my pieces. This right here, to this point, is our pieces already hand stitched. You can see it looks pretty seamless. It doesn't look like it's out of shape or anything. Now, keep in mind though, when you're putting these pieces together, it can be daunting. I tend to have to sit here for 30 minutes to an hour putting all these wonderful pieces together in hopes that they all come out right, and if it does not, then I try to keep going. Now, you can trim your pieces down if needed, but try not to cut or remove any additional if the pieces are already stitched together, because it'll make it much harder to complete it in that fashion, because the fact that you've already cut the thread that you were already stitching. 9 times out of 10, you want to make sure that the length of thread that you have is the length of your arm, if not a little further. I like to go to what I can reach when it comes to hand sewing. Alrighty, so I am already at my next point, and as you can see, I hold it properly in place. Excuse the band-aid. And I will continue stitching, as I'm left-handed, to continue stitching across, I would say 4 or 5 stitches. And then I will take, and once I complete that, I will pull them through, remove my pins. This is why I like having a stand-up pin cushion. And I will align them to what I need. And then I will begin once again wrapping them and stitching them as I'm going. Now be sure to back stitch one stitch as you're hand piecing. If not, it will come together or it will gather, and either way don't look pretty. So your next objective will be, once this is completed, you will want to begin putting together your next piece. So you don't exactly want to keep going, but sometimes you will find that you run out of pieces to cut, or you run out of stitches to make. And in that case, always make sure you cut out additional pieces as you go. Now, you don't exactly want to stop your piecing if you forget easily on where you're located on your project. Next, I will show you how to pin it and how to begin your next 2 rows, as well as how to put one row together. Okay, so I have these 2 pieces. This is row 3 and row 4. Now, to begin it, I always look at my previous one to see where the next one begins. So the next one is higher up, then one next to it is lower down. So you will stitch it, begin pinning like this, and I usually make sure to not pin things upside down, but it does happen. Once it's stitched in, it's very hard to remove. So be sure to pay attention to where you're pinning and where you are putting everything. 2, best advice, try not to pin 2 colors together. It doesn't look as pretty and doesn't give it as much of a selection when looking at it from afar. Now, I have it pinned for the beginning. Now, your next objective will be keeping to your point, and I usually, holding this in place, I usually make sure to line up my points and pull out that part at the bottom so my point is on point. And then I will pin it once again and make sure that I don't pin all the way over to that point, so that when it's laid out, it is not rumpled. Yes, I have a pin in my mouth. Only professionals do that. So don't try it if you have not learned how to hold one in your mouth. Now, I have my point together. Now, this point right here has to be continued all the way down, and you want to make sure that you keep your points together so that whenever you go to stitch them, you don't stitch to where your thread can be seen. Alright, so I have my 2 pieces, and to make a row, you will line them up face to face, front and back, but they are face to face. You want to make sure to pin them properly, and this is where you can use a sewing machine. On average, I tend to just do it by hand, as I'm more used to doing it by hand. Now I will simply just pin them like this and then pick up another set and keep going. The more that you pin together, the less you'll have to pick up more and pin them. So make sure that you keep up with the number. On the one I am currently working on, it is 8. 8 across, 8 rows down. So I will pin together 2 at a time, having 4 total. So our next part of the video, I will be showing you how to do paper piecing. Okay, so this is our paper piecing session. That is this particular paper piece. Now these are done by hand, but you can also do them by machine. Machine wise, it makes it go, I would say, much faster. So first we're going to take, as you can see, I have mine cut out on paper. Good, always keep one pair of scissors for your paper cutting and cutting through the stronger fabrics. Now I'm just going to take and cut these out, and then I will begin to add my pieces together. These two, you can go ahead and count out all the pieces that you need, or you feel you may need. But this is a form of paper piecing that I have recently taught myself that requires a little extra work, but it can be just as pleasing to see the result of your hard work whenever it is completed. But keep in mind that not everything will be lined up if you do not pay attention to how well you cut your pieces down. So I will typically line them up to another piece to make sure that they will go together. You don't necessarily want to have any pieces that don't follow each other, because when you do so, it will not look as good. Hi everyone. Okay, so I have my pieces cut out. 7 pieces all together for this one. I have my school glue ready to simply put our pieces together. I've adjusted my camera, as well as 7 hexagons ready to be folded over. Now I have at this time been practicing on how to do so. Now you're going to take your piece, and I like to make sure that I don't put a whole lot. Okay, so I will line it up the best I can right there. Now all I'm going to do is make sure to go around alrighty. Now I will simply fold this over, and the next fold it over, and keep going around until I get all the pieces folded over in place. Now next, you want to make sure that once these are all folded over, you want to make sure that you don't put a whole bunch of glue, because of the fact that it will unfortunately gum up your machine. Now I've got it all nice and pieced the way I need it to look, and I will go on to the next one. In this fashion, it should only take maybe a few moments at most to put all these little pieces together. It's okay if it takes you longer, because the fact that it does take a little while to get all these little pieces in. Now I will take this piece, fold it over. Next piece, I do the same. Fold it over. And then I will continue going around until it is completed. Now keep in mind, this is not the easiest way, but it is a simpler way, so that you don't have to do all the extra stitches and it comes out more uniform whenever you have it pieced together. Now I have the pieces that are going to line up together, and we will begin to piece it on the machine. Now my machine isn't the greatest machine, as you can see. It is a Brother. Let's leave it like that. Oh, wait. Here we go. All right. It is a Brother Project Runway, so we are going to mark it at 1. Let's go down to 5. And we're going to go over, or actually we're going to go back. We're going to line it up. We're going to make our stitches a little bit bigger, so that the pieces won't look all rumpled and questionable in form. And then I will take these 2 pieces and I'll simply line them up like so, making sure that my pieces don't need additional work. And I will begin. Uh-oh. This sometimes happens. So I will begin again. But in making sure that you keep your pieces together at all times. Now I will raise my foot up, bring it out, making sure that that's the stitch I wish to make. I always lower my foot to ensure that it doesn't bring out more than I need. And I think I'm going to go with something different. It doesn't exactly jive with the style that I was wanting. So I'll just simply cut it apart and try again. Now keep in mind that you may do this 2 or 3 times before you figure out what exactly you want. And I would say let's go with the number 6 instead. The number 6 is a basic overcast. It's not a fancy one or anything like that. So we're going to line it up again. And we will do this over. All right. Now, here we go with our last step. And when you bring it up, you lift the lever, you bring it out. That looks good. Drop it. Now we clip it, we check it, and then we do it again. Now, I will continue doing this, and at the return of our video, we'll see our completed form. So stay tuned for the next few minutes. Okay, so folks, I am almost completed stitching this piece together. You're welcome to begin watching it. There we go. Now all I am doing is coming to corners of the hexagon and lining it back up and resuming where I started. Now all I'm doing is resuming where I start, and then when I get to a corner I flip it and then continue going. Now at this time I lift up, check it, bring it out, and I will check to see how it looks and make sure that it is lined up. Now, most of the time I would have questioned, you know, was it completed? Sometimes you want to make sure that you get all these nice little seams out. Now, this is a simpler way of doing this. And since this isn't going on anything else except it might become an applique of some sort, I will take, moving this over, and I will switch my needle back to number 1 and center it so that when it comes down, it will flip back around, and I will complete this flower as it is seen. Then that way it will be unable to the sides will not shift as I am trying to lay it onto something. Now, I understand the fact of it is paper piece, so I have to make sure. Always make sure you remove all of your paper once an item is completed when it is paper piece. Now, I'm not great at doing that, so sometimes I have to remind myself, hey, you haven't completed that, you haven't gotten rid of all the paper. Now this is the final step of this flower that says it is completed. These do make lovely appliques for any form of handwork, or you can simply complete it into a lovely paper piece project. Now, I would not always say this, but make sure that you do not leave this paper in the quilt, as I feel it would gum up a washing machine over time if it was left in there. So be sure to remove all paper before washing your project. Now we bring our machine back up into position. We pull it out just so that we know, okay, it is at that point. We look over it, remove all little strings and attachments that come with this. And I tend to like to look over it and see it. Alright, so now we have completed our project and we have a finished flower. This is a pieced by machine, paper pieced flower. It has only taken me about 20 or 30 minutes to put this together, so I will probably revisit it later and see what I can actually make with it. Because the simple fact of you never know what you can do with something until you try. So I will sign off for now, and we will begin our final goodbyes in the next video. Okay folks, so we're at the end of our video, and I have created a paper pieced hexagon, as well as shown how to put together your non-paper hexagon quilt as well. This is a fun project. This is something that I enjoy doing because I can just sit there and watch TV, travel. I could pretty much be doing anything and still be able to work on these. Probably majority of the time. Because if you are not doing anything, it's a good idea to keep your hands busy. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you in the next video.